As you can probably tell, I'm at work right now, and this is one of the reasons I've been too busy to upload videos lately. I've just been putting in a lot of hours here and have not had time or energy to work on my own projects. But I've got these Daytona USA machines here in the shop right now I'm doing a restoration on. This pair on the left has been in storage for probably at least 10 years, if I had to guess, and I've been having a lot of fun putting these back together and fixing them up after having them sit for so long. But I figured some of you might like to see what's inside these. They were very, very complex for something that was made 21 years ago, back in 1994. In fact, I'd say even by today's standards, these things are pretty complex. So let's take a look inside one of these, shall we? Here's the heart of the game right here, the Sega Model 2 board set. This is a 4-board stack. Got the ROM board on top, the communication board underneath, the CPU board, and then underneath that is the video board. I'll take a closer look at these in just a minute. I don't want to take this one out of the machine, but I'll pull out another set so you can see what they look like underneath. This whole system is based on the Intel 960 CPU, running at 25 megahertz. It's a 32-bit RISC processor, and it's got several coprocessors working with it to handle the graphics, so it doesn't have much of a workload compared to everything else. I'll explain more in just a bit when I get the other board set out. But it's definitely a powerful piece of hardware for 21 years ago. Back here is the I/O board. This handles all the player controls, and I'm pretty sure it also drives the lamps in the view buttons up here. This has its own processor, the classic Zilog Z80. And then up here, another Z80 based board with its own CPU. This one handles the force feedback for the steering. And you can see that dual 7-segment LED display there that actually shows the position of the steering wheel. So I'm moving the steering wheel just a little bit to either direction. You can see it decrease or increase the numbers with the relation to the steering wheel. This board down here is the amplifier and equalizer for the subwoofer. Just got a little 4-inch subwoofer under the seat. This one with the heatsink on it here is the amplifier for the front speakers that are up next to the monitor. Back there in the corner is another 2-board stack. That is the soundboard. Also has its own CPU, a Motorola 68000. And we've got the logic power supply here. And then a little bit, alrighty. A little bit back farther in there is the power transformer for the rest of the machine and the fuses. And the monitor is a 25-inch Naneo MS8. These run at what we call a medium resolution. The horizontal retrace rate is 24 kilohertz on these versus the standard 15 kilohertz of a consumer TV. So they have a bit higher video resolution than a standard consumer video game of the period. See if I can take a quick look around the back side of the cabinet too. Well, there's not much to see back here. This is the monitor chassis, and then a ways up above that is the picture tube itself. Can't really see in here because it's too dark. Yeah, I can't see much down here either. This is the back of the pedals for the gas and brake. You can see the 2 potentiometers here and the gears that drive them. Those LEDs that are showing up are actually on the soundboard, which is mounted underneath the floor there. And I forgot to mention earlier, these machines are actually linked together with fiber optic cables, not regular electrical cable. And I think they did that for a couple reasons. One was probably for lower latency between the cabinets, so there wasn't any lag while you're playing the game. although the lag for fiber optic versus copper is probably negligible. But I think the main reason that they did that was to prevent ground loops between the cabinets, because you can link up to 8 of these machines together, and if you had these in a large room being fed by different AC outlets, there was a pretty good chance you're going to get some nasty ground loops if these machines had been linked by a standard copper cable. So having fiber optics connecting them together, you know, you didn't have to worry about ground loops that way. But let's go take a look at the circuit boards more closely now. Here's a spare control panel. I can show you what the inside looks like on these. They're also pretty complicated. It's got a 100 volt AC bi-directional motor that runs all the time in either direction, and then the amount of force that's transferred to the steering wheel is determined by this big electric clutch down here. And you know, then it's got its output connected to this big pulley on the steering shaft here. It's got a pretty nice self-centering mechanism on there, and 2 potentiometers, one for the force feedback and one for the game steering. Very nice feeling mechanism. Here's a look at the individual boards. This one here is the video board. It's mainly a whole bunch of different types and sizes of memory ICs on here, all driven by various custom chips. In fact, these big ones here have over 300 pins on them, and each layer of graphics on the screen has its own subsystem on here, so it's pretty darn complicated. I believe that Fujitsu had a big part in making this system as well. They made all the video coprocessor ICs that they called TGP ICs. I don't know what that stands for. Maybe textured graphics processor or something like that, or I don't know. But here's the CPU board. Again, lots of high pin count custom ICs and various RAM chips on here. And you can see the Intel 960 CPU. Over here is the ROM board. Nothing really interesting here, just a bunch of 40 and 42 pin 16-bit ROM ICs. And over here is the communication board that handles linking the multiple machines together. This is another board in the system that is based on its own Z80 processor and EEPROM. So it's like its own standalone computer that handles its own workload so that the main CPU doesn't have to do that. And on the end here is one set of the fiber optic cable sockets. I just cannot believe the density of some of these circuits on here. You know, the pin count. I'm pretty sure this whole system was 32 bits. I don't know if the graphics subsystem on this was 64 bits or not. I don't think so. I'm probably thinking of the Atari Jaguar that was kind of a hybrid 32 and 64-bit system, but this one I'm all but certain is purely 32-bit. Lots of stuff on here for the, what was the video resolution on this? 496 by 384 or 512 by 384 or something like that at 65,000 colors. But again, back in 1994, this was pretty top-notch stuff. And probably one of the biggest advantages of this versus a common home video game, this system runs at 60 frames per second. So it's very, very, very snappy action and very low latency, you know, throughout. You know, quick response to the controls. Most home systems, even to this day, only run at 30 frames per second. So this was a little bit different of an experience compared to the home market, especially for the time that it came out. So definitely a lot of Sega's arcade games really stood out, especially back then, and some of them even continue to do so. I think Sega is still making arcade games. They're nothing like they used to be, but they're still around. And in fact, this system, the Model 2, they continued this all the way up through several revisions, all the way up to the 2C CRX, I think, and then they moved up to the Model 3, and then from there it just kept, you know, getting more and more modern, and they probably eventually went into the PC-based hardware like a lot of other companies did. But you know, this was kind of back in Sega's heyday, where they designed their own stuff, and you know, really nothing could touch Sega's arcade games back in their time for their complexity. But I think that's about all the time I've got to do this here at work, so I better wrap this video up. But I hope you guys liked having a look inside one of these machines. It's really neat when there's 4 machines linked up. A lot of the attract mode scenes actually pan across all 4 screens. Sometimes it splits up into 2 halves, and sometimes it uses all 4, all synchronized.